I'm not really one for sharing stories, but something happened last night that's got me all twisted up inside. I work as a delivery guy for a local restaurant, nothing fancy, just making ends meet. Last night, I got a late-night order to deliver food to this place called the Psycho Center. Yeah, you heard me right, the Psycho Center. Anyway, it's about 11:30 p.m. when I pull up to this place. The Psycho Center is this old, rundown building on the outskirts of town. It's surrounded by thick woods, and the only light comes from the dim street lamps. I double-check the address, thinking maybe I got it wrong, but nope, this is definitely the place. I grab the food bag and make my way to the entrance. The front door creaks open as I step inside, and I'm hit with this musty smell that makes my skin crawl. The reception area is deserted, but there's this eerie glow coming from down the hallway. I figure that must be where I need to go. I start walking. The hallway seems to go on forever, twisting and turning like a damn maze. I keep expecting someone to jump out at me, but it's just me and my imagination. Finally, I reach the end of the hallway and find myself in a large, dimly lit room. There are rows of beds lining the walls, and I can hear faint whispers coming from somewhere in the darkness. I try to shake off the feeling of unease as I make my way to the nurse's station. That's when I see her, a woman sitting behind the desk, her eyes fixed on something in front of her. She looks up when she hears me approach, and I swear her eyes are empty, like there's nothing behind them. I clear my throat, trying to get her attention. I say, hi. Holding out the food bag. I've got a delivery for, the Psycho Center? The woman's lips curl into a smile, but it's not a friendly smile.
Yes.
She says, her voice like nails on a chalkboard.
You're just in time for dinner.
She takes the bag from me and sets it down on the desk. I start to back away, eager to get out of there, but then she speaks again.
You should stay,
she says, her smile widening.
We could use an extra pair of hands in the kitchen.
I laugh nervously, trying to come up with an excuse to leave, but before I can say anything, she gestures towards the hallway behind me.
Go on,
she says.
The kitchen is just down the hall. You can't miss it?
I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the way she's looking at me, or maybe it's just the feeling of being watched. But I find myself nodding and heading towards the hallway, and every instinct is screaming at me to get out of there. But then I hear it, a voice, soft and pleading, coming from one of the rooms. I stop in my tracks, my breath catching in my throat. It sounds like someone is in pain, like they're begging for help. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I follow the sound, pushing open the door to the room it's coming from. And that's when I see him. A man strapped to a bed, his eyes wide with fear.
Please,
he whispers, his voice barely audible.
You have to help me. They're going to kill me.
I try to speak, to reassure him that everything will be okay. But before I can say anything, I hear footsteps behind me. I turn around to see the nurse standing in the doorway, her smile replaced by a look of pure rage.
What are you doing in here?
She demands, her voice cold and venomous.
This area is off-limits to visitors.
I try to stammer out an explanation, but she cuts me off with a wave of her hand. It doesn't matter, she says, her eyes boring into mine. You've seen too much. Before I can react, she lunges at me, her hands closing around my throat. I try to fight her off, but she's surprisingly strong, and I can feel myself starting to black out. Just when I think it's all over, I hear a voice behind me, a familiar voice, calling my name. I turn to see my coworker, Sarah, standing in the doorway, a look of horror on her face.
What the hell is going on?
She yells, rushing forward to pull the nurse off of me. Together, we manage to overpower her, and Sarah helps me to my feet.
We need to get out of here,
She says, her voice trembling.
now. We make a run for it, racing down the hallway towards the exit.
I can hear the nurse shouting behind us, but I don't dare look back. All I can think about is getting as far away from that place as possible. We finally burst through the front doors and into the cool night air, gasping for breath. I collapse onto the pavement. Sarah sits down next to me, her eyes wide with fear. She asks,
What the hell just happened?
her voice barely above a whisper. I shake my head, still trying to process everything that's happened. I don't know, I say finally. But I never want to go back there again. And as we sit there, catching our breath, I can't shake the feeling that we've stumbled onto something truly terrifying, something that's better left forgotten. Hey guys, I want to share something with you that happened in my town a while back. You know how small towns are. Gossip spreads faster than wildfire, especially when it's about something spooky. Well, this one's about a mysterious food delivery guy who only shows up when the thunder's roaring and the lightning's cracking. It all started on a particularly stormy night. The rain was pounding against my window like an angry drummer, and the wind was howling like a banshee. I was chilling at home, binge-watching some Netflix, when suddenly, a notification popped up on my phone. It was a new food delivery service, but what caught my eye was the delivery boy's name, Shadow. Now I know what you're thinking. Who in their right mind would order food from a guy named Shadow during a thunderstorm? Well, call me curious, call me stupid, but I had to see if it was real. I placed my order, half expecting it to be some kind of prank, but to my surprise, within minutes, there was a knock on my door. I hesitated for a moment before opening it, and there he was, the infamous Shadow. He was dressed in all black, with a hood pulled over his head, hiding his face in shadows.
Here's your order.
I took the bag from him and handed over the money, but before I could say anything, he disappeared into the night. I shrugged it off as just another weird encounter in this town and dug into my food. But as soon as I took the first bite, something felt off. It tasted strange, like nothing I'd ever eaten before. I pushed the plate away, suddenly feeling nauseous. That's when things started getting really freaky. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw these twisted, nightmarish visions, like something out of a horror movie. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just the storm messing with my head, but deep down, I knew something was seriously wrong. The next day, I tried to forget about the whole thing and go about my business as usual. But everywhere I went, I heard whispers about Shadow and his cursed deliveries. People said those who ate his food were never the same again, haunted by nightmares and plagued by strange afflictions. I tried to write it off as just another urban legend, but the fear gnawed at me like a hungry beast. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something sinister was lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, I received another notification on my phone, another delivery from Shadow. Paralyzed with fear. But this time, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let Shadow's curse consume me like it had so many others. So I made a decision that would change everything. I grabbed my keys and headed out into the storm, determined to confront Shadow once and for all. The rain lashed at my face as I raced through the deserted streets, my mind racing with a million thoughts. Finally, I reached the address listed on the delivery notification, an old abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The door creaked open as I stepped inside. And there, in the flickering light of a single bulb, stood Shadow, his hooded figure looming over me like a specter of death. "I know what you're doing," I said, my voice trembling with fear. I know about your cursed deliveries, about what you've done to this town. Shadow said nothing, but I could feel his gaze piercing through me like a dagger. You think you can scare me? I continued, my voice rising with newfound courage. Well, I'm not afraid of you. I won't let you destroy any more lives. And with that, I lunged forward, ready to confront whatever horrors awaited me. But as I reached out to grab Shadow, something strange happened. He vanished into thin air, leaving nothing but a swirling cloud of darkness behind. I stumbled back in shock, my mind reeling with disbelief. Had it all been a hallucination? A trick of the storm-addled mind? But then, as I turned to leave, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. A single, solitary footprint, imprinted in the dusty floor where Shadow had stood. And in that moment I knew, Shadow may have disappeared into the night, but his curse would live on, lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike again. So if you ever find yourself caught in a stormy night, and a delivery notification pops up on your phone, remember this tale of caution, for in the darkness, there are things far more terrifying than thunder and lightning. As the clock struck midnight, I found myself gearing up for another night of delivering food. It was a typical routine for me: hop on my bike, zip through the quiet streets, and drop off orders to hungry customers. But tonight something felt different. Maybe it was the eerie glow of the moon casting shadows on the deserted roads, or perhaps it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. I hopped on my old, rusty bike and set off into the night. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl or the distant howl of a dog. My first stop was a quaint little house on the edge of town. The place gave off a strange vibe, but I shrugged it off and rang the doorbell. A middle-aged woman answered the door, her eyes darting nervously around as if she was expecting something or someone to jump out at her. She quickly snatched the bag of food from my hands and slammed the door shut, leaving me standing there in confusion. Shrugging it off, I pedaled on to my next delivery. The streets seemed to grow darker with each passing minute. I reached the next house on my list, a rundown, dilapidated mansion. The place looked like it hadn't been lived in for years, yet someone had placed an order for delivery. Reluctantly, I approached the front door and knocked. To my surprise, it creaked open on its own, revealing a dimly lit hallway shrouded in shadows. My heart raced as I cautiously stepped inside, the floorboards groaning beneath my feet. "Hello?" I called out. There was no response, just the eerie silence of the abandoned house. I quickly dropped the food on the nearest table and made a hasty retreat, eager to leave the creepy mansion behind me. But as I pedaled away, something was following me. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see a ghostly figure lurking in the darkness. But there was nothing there, just the empty streets bathed in moonlight. I shook my head and tried to focus on the task at hand. My next delivery was to a small cottage nestled deep in the woods. The path leading up to it was overgrown and twisted. I hesitated for a moment, but the promise of a hefty tip spurred me on. As I approached the cottage, the air seemed to grow colder, and the rustling of the leaves sounded like whispers in the wind. I knocked on the door. To my surprise, the door swung open, revealing a dimly lit room illuminated by flickering candles. A figure sat hunched over in the corner, their face hidden in the shadows. I cleared my throat nervously. I have a delivery for. I trailed off, my voice faltering as the figure slowly turned to face me. It was a woman. Her eyes hollow and lifeless, her skin pale as death itself. She reached out a trembling hand, beckoning me closer. My instincts screamed at me to run, but something held me in place, rooted to the spot.
You shouldn't be here.
She whispered, her voice barely more than a raspy whisper.
This place, it's cursed.
I wanted to ask her what she meant, but before I could speak, she let out a blood-curdling scream. I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet as I scrambled to get away. But it was too late. The trees seemed to loom closer, their branches reaching out to grab me. I pedaled as fast as I could, the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I didn't stop until I reached the safety of the town, the distant screams still ringing in my ears. As I caught my breath, I couldn't help but wonder what had happened back there. Was it all just a figment of my imagination, or was there something truly sinister lurking in the woods? I may never know for sure, but one thing's for certain. I won't be going back to that cursed cottage anytime soon. It was a regular night, nothing out of the ordinary. I was just cruising around, delivering food to hungry folks in my beat-up old car. Then this order pops up on my app. It's from this restaurant I've heard whispers about, the Wraith's Kitchen. They say it's haunted, but I ain't one to believe in that kind of stuff. I mean ghosts? But hey, a delivery's a delivery, right? So I accept it and punch the address into my GPS. The closer I get to the Wraith's Kitchen, the weirder I start feeling. Like this creeping sensation crawling up my spine. But I shake it off, thinking it's just my imagination playing tricks on me. When I pull up to the restaurant, it's like something out of a horror flick. The place is all dark and run down, with cobwebs hanging off the walls and windows boarded up like they're trying to keep something in, not out. I should have turned around right then and there, but I needed the cash. So I gather up my courage and step inside. The air is thick with this musty smell, like old books and rotting wood. I make my way to the counter, where this creepy old guy is waiting for me. He hands over the bag of food without saying a word, just staring at me with these empty eyes. I try to make a quick exit, but as soon as I reach for the door handle, it's like someone slams it shut from the other side. I'm trapped. Panic starts to claw its way up my throat as I realize I'm stuck in this haunted restaurant. I try calling out for help, but my voice echoes back at me, sounding hollow and distant. That's when I hear it, the whispers. Soft at first, like the rustling of leaves in the wind, but then growing louder and more sinister. They're everywhere, surrounding me, suffocating me. I stumble through the darkness, trying to find a way out, but every door I try is locked tight. And that's when I see them, shadowy figures lurking in the corners, their eyes glowing with a malevolent light. I can feel their hunger, like a physical presence pressing down on me. I run, faster than I've ever run in my life, but no matter how hard I try, I can't escape them. They're always there, just out of reach, waiting for me to slip up so they can pounce. Hours pass, or maybe it's days, I can't tell anymore. Time loses all meaning in this nightmare. And just when I think I can't take it anymore, I stumble upon a hidden staircase leading down into the depths of the restaurant. And that's when I find it, the source of all this horror. A room filled with ancient symbols scrawled across the walls in blood, and in the center, a twisted altar surrounded by flickering candles. But the most terrifying thing of all is what's lying on the altar, a human body, pale and lifeless, its eyes staring blankly into the abyss. I realize then what the Wraith's Kitchen truly is, a feeding ground for vengeful spirits, hungry for more than just food. As the realization sinks in, I hear them closing in around me, their whispers growing louder and more insistent. And then, just as I'm about to be consumed by darkness, I wake up. But was it really just a dream? Or did I truly escape the clutches of the Wraith's Kitchen? I guess I'll never know for sure. All I know is that I'll never look at a food delivery order the same way again. And if you ever come across the race kitchen, do yourself a favor and run. Run as far and as fast as you can. I stumbled upon the job like I always did, just another notification flashing on my phone, a high-paying gig from some fancy-sounding address. They wanted food from a place I'd never even heard of, but money was tight, and I wasn't about to pass up a chance to make some easy cash. The directions led me through the winding streets of the city, to a neighborhood I'd never been to before. The houses grew bigger and grander. Finally, I arrived at the address, a mansion so massive it looked more like a palace. As I approached the door, it swung open before I could even knock. A butler, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, greeted me with a nod and ushered me inside. The place was fancy as hell, with marble floors and chandeliers that sparkled like diamonds. The butler led me through a maze of hallways until we reached a set of double doors. He pushed them open, revealing a dining room straight out of a fairy tale. The table was long enough to seat a small army, covered in fine china and silverware that glinted in the candlelight. At the head of the table sat the man himself, the reclusive billionaire who had ordered the feast. He was dressed in a tailored suit, his face obscured by the flickering shadows. But there was something about him, something that made my skin crawl.
"Ah, you must be the delivery boy,"
he said, his voice smooth as silk.
"I trust you have brought everything we requested?"
I nodded, trying to keep my cool. "Yeah, everything's here. Hope you enjoy your meal." The billionaire waved a hand dismissively.
"Oh, I'm sure we will. Please join us."
I hesitated, but the thought of making small talk with this creepy old dude was better than facing the streets again. So, I took a seat at the far end of the table, trying to blend into the background. The meal began, and at first, everything seemed normal enough. The billionaire and his guests chatted amiably, while I tried to focus on my food and ignore the feeling of being watched. But as the night wore on, things started to get weird. The conversation took a dark turn, with talk of secret societies and occult rituals. I tried to laugh it off as rich people being eccentric, but the unease in the pit of my stomach wouldn't go away. Then came the main course, a dish unlike anything I had ever seen. It was served under a silver dome, which the billionaire ceremoniously lifted to reveal a human head. I nearly gagged, my stomach churning in horror. But before I could make a run for it, the billionaire spoke again, his voice cold and calculating.
"You see, my dear boy, we are not like other men. We do not partake of the flesh of beasts. No, we prefer something more."
I felt bile rise in my throat as the truth dawned on me. These people were cannibals, feasting on the flesh of their fellow man. And now, they expected me to join them. I pushed back from the table, bile rising in my throat. "I can't do this, I have to go." But the butler blocked my path, his eyes glinting with malice. "I'm afraid that won't be possible. You see, you know too much now. You've seen what we are." Panic surged through me as I realized I was trapped, surrounded by monsters wearing the faces of men. But just when all hope seemed lost, a voice spoke up from the shadows.
Leave him be.
A figure stepped out of the darkness, tall and imposing with a presence that commanded attention. It was the billionaire's daughter, her eyes burning with defiance.
He's done nothing wrong. Let him go.
For a moment, it seemed like the room held its breath, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, with a nod from the billionaire, the butler stepped aside, allowing me to flee into the night. I ran until my legs gave out, the horrors of that mansion haunting my every step. And as I collapsed on the pavement, gasping for breath, I knew that I would never be the same again. For I had looked into the eyes of true evil, and it had looked back at me.